The lavish decorations sparkled under the chandelier, but as I stood in the corner of the grand ballroom, I felt a familiar sting of inadequacy. My parents were whispering at a table, their eyes darting toward the groom's family, the tension palpable. They only paid for this wedding to secure a lucrative business deal. Their voices dripping with disdain for the very celebration meant to honor my sister. I had always been the maid of all work, forever overlooked and underappreciated. I thought this day would be different, but as the clock ticked down to the speeches, I felt the weight of betrayal settle in. Time was running out to confront the truth before it slipped away into the facade of a perfect wedding. I had spent countless hours helping to plan, decorate and organize every detail, only to realize that my efforts were recognized only as a means to an end. My role was to be the reliable daughter who would always be there, the one who would never cause a scene or draw attention to the family's dysfunction. The irony of being invisible at my own sister's wedding was not lost on me. As the guests mingled and laughter filled the room, I felt a growing urgency to break the silence surrounding the truth. I couldn't ignore the whispers or the way my parents dismissed my contributions, treating me like a mere resource rather than family. The wedding was supposed to be about love, but for my parents it was a transaction, a way to secure their own interests. My heart raced as I contemplated my next move. I had to expose the reality before it was too late, before the day turned into just another act in our family's ongoing drama. Throughout my life, I had watched my sister bask in the spotlight while I toiled in the shadows. My parents' favoritism was a well-known family secret, a dynamic that had been in place for as long as I could remember. I was the dependable one, always available to fix their problems, to be there when they needed me. Whether it was helping with chores, organizing family events, or just being the sounding board for their complaints, I was always on call. Meanwhile, my sister, the golden child, was showered with praise and affection, her every whim catered to as if she were royalty. It was as if I was always in the background, a ghost in my own family. I had spent countless hours arranging, decorating, and planning this wedding, and yet it felt like my contributions were expected, not appreciated. The financial burden of this wedding, which I had to help organize, weighed heavily on me. I had poured my time, energy, and even my savings into making this day perfect, but all I received in return was a reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. As I overheard snippets of my parents' conversations about the wedding, the reality hit me harder. My efforts were not about love or support, they were merely a means to an end. They were only interested in how much money they could save or how much prestige they could gain from this union. I caught my mother whispering to my father about the arrangements, her eyes darting toward the groom's family like a hawk, sizing up the potential benefits of the merger. "This is a great business opportunity for us," she said. My heart sank as I realized that my sister's happiness was secondary to their ambitions. It became painfully clear that my family wasn't really celebrating my sister's marriage. Instead, they were using this as a chance to strengthen their own financial position. It was as if we were characters in a play, and the wedding was just another act in their ongoing drama. The urgency of exposing them pressed against my chest as the reception continued, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running out of time. I watched my sister, radiant in her wedding gown, blissfully unaware of the true motives behind the event. She believed she was the center of attention, that this day was crafted with love and care for her. But I knew better. I was the one who caught the whispers, the one who saw my parents' true colors. I felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal, and it fueled my determination to confront them. The clock ticked down to the speeches, and I was torn between the desire to protect my sister and the need to reveal the truth. I couldn't keep silent any longer. The facade had to fall. I had been their punching bag for too long, and I could no longer allow their greed to dictate my life, or my sister's happiness. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to do. This was my moment to break free from the chains of their expectations. I knew the risks. I could be the villain in their eyes, the one who ruined the perfect day. But the alternative was to remain silent, to let this charade continue without challenge. And that was a fate I could no longer accept. The air felt thick with tension as I approached my parents, my heart racing. I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me, the familiar guilt creeping in. But I pushed it aside. I had to be strong. I had to stand up for myself and for my sister. This was not just about me. It was about exposing the toxic dynamics that had defined our family for too long. I was ready to confront the truth, and I would not let them silence me any longer. In the midst of the wedding festivities, I stumbled upon a document tucked away in the wedding planners folder. Financial projections tied to the groom's family business. My heart sank as I read the lines that detailed how this union was merely a means to an end. I overheard my parents laugh, dismissing my sister's happiness as secondary to the business deal they were orchestrating. "She's just a pawn in this," my mother had sneered. As their laughter echoed in my ears, I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. It was time to stop being the invisible sister and confront the reality of our family dynamics. I had been hiding in the shadows for too long, allowing my parents to use me and my sister as tools for their gain. I felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on me, but the thought of exposing the truth made my pulse race. This wasn't just my sister's big day. It was a stage for my parents' manipulation, and I could not let it go on any longer. I glanced around the room, watching guests mingle and dance, oblivious to the dark undercurrents swirling beneath the surface. My sister was radiant, laughing with her new husband, completely unaware of the reality behind her fairy tale wedding. It made my stomach churn. How could they do this to her? How could my parents reduce such a significant moment into a mere transaction? I felt a fire ignite within me, pushing me closer to the edge of my breaking point. As I carefully folded the document and tucked it into my pocket, I made my way through the crowd, my heart pounding with each step. I needed to find the right moment to confront my parents. I had to do it before the speeches began. If I waited too long, the moment would pass, and I would revert to being the silent, invisible daughter. Finally, I found my parents standing near the bar, their eyes scanning the room for any signs of approval from the groom's family. They were practically giddy with excitement, oblivious to the chaos brewing inside me. I approached them, fueled by a mix of fear and determination. This was it. I couldn't hold back any longer. I had to reveal the truth. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice steady though my heart raced. They turned to me, their expressions a mix of irritation and surprise. "I need to talk to you." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Not now, Emily. Can't you see we're busy?" I took a deep breath, grounding myself. "No, this can't wait. It's important." Their annoyance was palpable, but I pressed on. "This wedding isn't just about love. It's a business deal for you, isn't it? You're using my sister as a pawn in your game." My mother's eyes narrowed, and I could see the anger flashing across her face. "How dare you speak to us like that? This is your sister's wedding. You're ruining everything." I stood my ground, feeling emboldened by the truth. "No, you're ruining it. You're making it about money and power instead of love and family." I refused to be a part of this charade any longer. My father stepped in, his voice low and threatening. "You need to stop this right now, Emily. You're going to ruin your sister's big day. Think about the family's reputation." I shook my head, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm tired of thinking about the family's reputation when it's clear you don't care about your own daughter's happiness. You're only concerned with how this wedding benefits you." The tension in the air was thick, and I could feel the eyes of the guests beginning to shift toward us, sensing the confrontation. I knew I was risking everything, but I also knew I had to do this. I couldn't let my sister walk down the aisle under false pretenses. As the clock ticked closer to the speeches, I felt my heart race again. It was now or never. I took a deep breath and prepared to take the plunge. I would expose the truth, no matter the consequences. I could see my parents' faces contorting with anger and disbelief. I was no longer afraid of their reactions. I had spent my entire life being scared of their wrath, but now I felt a surge of liberation. I was ready to take control of my own narrative, to step out of the shadows and reclaim my voice. The moment was approaching, and as the announcer prepared to call for the speeches, I knew I had to act. I would not let this day slip away without standing up for what was right. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I was ready to confront them, ready to reveal the truth, and ready to take the first step towards breaking free from the toxic dynamics that had defined my life for too long. With the speeches about to begin, I approached my parents and firmly stated, "I won't let you use this wedding as a cover for your greed. If you continue this charade, I will expose everything." My mother's eyes narrowed, dismissing my assertion as a childish threat. You wouldn't dare ruin your sister's big day, she shot back, her voice laced with venom. I stood my ground, knowing that if they pressed me, I would not hesitate to act. The tension in the air was thick, and I could feel my heart racing. It was clear they would test this limit, as they always had, expecting me to back down. My father's stern gaze challenged me, as if daring me to follow through on my promise. I could see the wheels turning in his head, calculating how to manipulate the situation to maintain their control. The stakes were escalating, and I could sense the impending confrontation looming over us all. I could hear the guests starting to gather, their laughter and chatter filling the ballroom, oblivious to the storm brewing in our corner. My mother leaned in closer to me, her voice low but dripping with disdain. You think you're being noble, Emily, but you're just being selfish. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event for your sister. You need to think about her. The guilt washed over me for a fleeting moment, but I quickly pushed it aside. They were manipulating my feelings, using my loyalty against me. I could almost hear her thoughts. Don't mess this up for us, don't ruin our chances. My father chimed in, his voice cold and calculated. It's just a wedding, Emily. Don't be selfish. We need this deal, and so does your sister. You're being dramatic. Their words felt like chains, binding me to their expectations. I could feel the tension in my chest rising as I fought against the urge to back down. The familiar feeling of being the dutiful daughter who always complied was creeping back in, but I was determined to resist it. I had spent my entire life catering to their whims, and I was done. The pressure intensified as I glanced toward the crowd, sensing the anticipation building. My sister's wedding was supposed to be a celebration, but I could see the cracks in the facade. My parents were desperate to maintain control, and I was the only one standing in their way. I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me like a heavy fog. I took a deep breath, grounding myself. You can't keep using me as a pawn in your games. I'm not going to let you manipulate me anymore. I see what you're doing. My mother's expression shifted from annoyance to anger, her voice rising slightly. You're making a mistake, Emily. You think you can just walk away from your family? Think about the consequences of your actions. The threat in her words was clear, but I stood my ground. You don't get to dictate my life anymore. You've made it clear time and time again that I'm just the backup plan, the one you can rely on when it suits you. I'm tired of being the invisible daughter. My father's face hardened, his patience wearing thin. You'll regret this. You're going to ruin everything we've worked for. You're just being difficult. I clenched my fists, feeling the adrenaline pumping through my veins. I'm not being difficult, I'm being honest. You can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. I refused to be complicit in this charade. Their anger was palpable, and I could see the disbelief in their eyes. I was finally standing up for myself, and it felt freeing. I had always been the one to back down to avoid confrontation, but not this time. It was as if a switch had flipped inside me, and I was ready to confront the truth head-on. The moment was approaching, and I knew I had to act before it slipped away. I could hear the announcer preparing to call for the speeches, and I could feel the eyes of the guests beginning to shift toward us, sensing the tension. This was my chance to break the cycle, to reclaim my voice. Taking a deep breath, I prepared to take the plunge. I would not allow fear to dictate my actions any longer. The truth needed to be revealed, and I would not let my family's deceit continue unchecked. With each passing second, I felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on me, but I also felt a newfound sense of empowerment. I was ready to take a stand for my sister, for myself, and for the truth. It was time to shatter the illusion of our perfect family. As the announcer's voice rang out, calling for the speeches, I stepped forward, ready to seize my moment. I knew the risk, but I was done letting fear dictate my life. This was my time to break free and reclaim my narrative. As the ceremony progressed, my parents pushed harder to ensure I maintained my role as the dutiful daughter. My mother cornered me, her voice low but insistent. You can't abandon your sister now. You know how this affects our family's reputation. Guilt washed over me, but I fought it back. They were manipulating my feelings, using my loyalty against me. My father chimed in, it's just a wedding, Emily. Don't be selfish. We need this deal. Their words felt like chains, binding me to their expectations. But I could see through their facade. They were desperate to maintain control over me while caring little for my feelings. The pressure intensified, and I could feel my resolve hardening. The weight of their expectations was suffocating. I could see my mother's eyes glittering with something dark, something that told me she was prepared to do whatever it took to keep me in line. I remembered all the times I had silenced my own voice to please them, the countless moments I had swallowed my thoughts to avoid confrontation. But today was different. I was standing on the precipice of a decision, and I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins. You have to think about your sister, Emily, my mother continued, her voice dripping with false concern. This is her day. You're going to ruin everything if you act out. This isn't just about you. It's about the family. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to center myself. I felt the familiar pang of guilt clawing at my insides, but I pushed it away. This wasn't just about my sister's wedding. It was about my life, my autonomy. I would not be a pawn in their game anymore. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. You don't get to decide what this day means for me or for my sister. This isn't love. It's a business deal, and I refuse to be complicit in it. My father's face turned crimson with rage. You're being dramatic, Emily. Stop this nonsense right now, or I will make sure everyone knows what a selfish daughter you are. His threats felt like daggers, but I stood my ground, refusing to let their anger intimidate me. The reception hall felt like it was closing in on me, the laughter and chatter of guests fading into a dull roar as I focused on my parents. I could hear the murmurs of the guests as they began to pick up on the tension. I could sense the atmosphere shifting, and I knew I had to act before it was too late. The speeches were moments away, and I could feel the urgency pressing against my chest. Think about what you're doing. My mother hissed, her eyes narrowing. You're about to ruin your sister's happiness for your own selfish reasons. Their manipulation was clear, but I was no longer the girl who would cower under their pressure. I had spent my entire life being treated like a second-class citizen, and I could feel the tide turning within me. The anger I had suppressed for so long was bubbling to the surface, and I was ready to unleash it. You don't care about her happiness. I shot back, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. You only care about your own image and how this wedding benefits you. I see through your lies, and I won't stand for it anymore. The tension was electric, and I could feel the eyes of the guests boring into us, waiting for what would happen next. I could hear whispers of shock ripple through the crowd, and I knew I had crossed a line. But I didn't care. I was done being the dutiful daughter who simply went along with their plans. The pressure mounted as my mother's expression shifted from anger to something colder, more calculating. You think you're being brave, Emily, but you're just being foolish. You'll regret this. You have no idea what you're doing to your family. Her words were meant to intimidate me, to push me back into my place, but I felt a surge of strength. I was breaking free from their manipulation, and I would face whatever consequences came my way. I had to expose the truth, not just for myself but for my sister as well. As I glanced around the room, I could see the concerned faces of guests, their expressions shifting from amusement to disbelief. They could sense the chaos brewing, and I could feel their anticipation. This was my moment. I had to make a choice. To continue hiding in the shadows or to step into the light and reveal the truth. With every passing second, I felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on me like a heavy fog. But I also felt a newfound sense of empowerment. I was ready to take a stand for my sister, for myself, and for the truth. It was time to shatter the illusion of our perfect family. The announcer's voice broke through my thoughts, calling for the speeches to begin. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. This was my chance to confront my parents, to expose their greed and manipulation for all to see. I would no longer be silenced. I would reclaim my voice and my narrative. With determination in my heart, I prepared to take the plunge, ready to face the chaos that lay ahead. As the speeches began, I watched my sister take the stage, glowing in her white gown. My parents smirked, confident that I would remain silent. But they were mistaken. The moment my sister thanked them for their support, I felt the room shift. My mother nudged me, expecting my compliance. Instead, the atmosphere crackled with tension. I could see the anticipation on everyone's faces, waiting for me to play the role I had always played. They thought I would remain the invisible daughter, but I was done hiding in the shadows. The moment had come for me to decide whether to let the truth remain buried, or to reveal the reality behind this facade. My heart raced as I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I knew this was the point of no return. I had spent so many years trapped under the expectations of my family, always the one who put her needs last. But now, standing amidst the opulence of the ballroom, I was ready to shatter that illusion. I had a voice and it was time for it to be heard. I watched as my sister smiled brightly, blissfully unaware of the web of deceit that surrounded her. She was lost in her own world, caught in the fairy tale my parents had constructed. But I couldn't allow her to walk down that aisle, to start her married life with a lie. The truth needed to come out, and I was the only one who could do it. The murmurs of the guests faded into the background as I focused on my sister's radiant face. I could feel my parents' eyes boring into me, their silent threats palpable in the air. My mother's expression was a mix of irritation and concern, while my father's was a mask of control, as if he were silently calculating how to manage the fallout of my potential actions. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward. The crowd fell silent, their attention shifting to me. I could practically hear the gasp ripple through the audience as they recognized the tension in my stance. This was it. I was going to confront them. I would expose the truth, no matter the consequences. "Can I have everyone's attention, please?" I called out, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The room quieted and all eyes turned toward me. Curiosity mingled with confusion. "I need to speak," I continued, feeling my heart race. "This wedding is not just a celebration of love. It's a business transaction." Gasps erupted from the audience, and I could see my mother's face pale as shock washed over her. The weight of my words hung in the air, and I could feel the tension in the room shift. I pressed on, revealing the plot I had overheard. My parents only paid for this event to secure a deal with the groom's family, using my sister as a pawn. The silence was deafening. My mother's face contorted in rage, her usual composure shattered. I could see the panic rising in my sister's eyes, as she began to understand the implications of my words. I wasn't shouting. I was simply stating the truth, and it felt liberating. This was my act of defiance. "Emily, how could you do this?" my sister shouted, her voice trembling with disbelief and hurt. I didn't want to hurt her, but I knew that the truth was more important than preserving the facade. "Because I love you," I replied, my voice firm. "I refuse to let you walk down the aisle under false pretenses. You deserve to know what's really happening." My father stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "You've ruined everything," he hissed, his voice low and threatening. "You think this is about you? You're making a fool of yourself." But I didn't care. Their anger didn't faze me, it only solidified my resolve. I was no longer the scapegoat, I was the one who had taken control. I could feel the eyes of the guests on me, their expressions a mixture of shock and intrigue. I had finally broken free from the chains that had held me down for so long. As chaos erupted around us, I saw the groom's family retreating, their faces a mixture of confusion and embarrassment. Without my support, my family was unmasked, and their true colors shone through. My mother fumbled through her words, trying to salvage her reputation, but it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no turning back now. The guests began to murmur amongst themselves, their eyes wide with shock. I could hear someone whisper, "How could they use their own daughter like that?" My sister's face reflected devastation as she realized that her marriage was built on lies. The facade of our perfect family crumbled before my eyes. In that moment I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had broken free from the chains of their expectations, and I no longer feared their judgment. I had reclaimed my voice, and it was more powerful than I had ever imagined. My family was in chaos, but I finally felt at peace. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had stood up for myself and for the truth. With a deep breath I stepped forward, silencing the crowd with a single gesture. "I have something to say," I declared, my voice steady. "This wedding is not just a celebration of love. It's a business transaction." Gasps erupted from the audience and I continued, revealing the plot I had overheard. My parents only paid for this event to secure a deal with the groom's family, using my sister as a pawn. The silence was deafening. My mother's face paled, and I could see the panic rise in my sister's eyes. I didn't yell or raise my voice. I simply stated the truth, and the weight of my words hung in the air like a heavy fog. This was my act of defiance, and I could almost taste the freedom that followed. In that moment, I saw my parents' expressions shift from smug satisfaction to shock and anger. My mother's mouth dropped open, and for a brief second she looked vulnerable, exposed. I had always known that speaking out would make them furious, but I had never felt such a rush of power before. It felt like I had finally taken control of my own narrative. "Emily, how could you do this?" My sister's voice trembled with disbelief. She stood frozen, her hands trembling as she processed the reality I had just unveiled. "You're ruining everything." I didn't want to hurt her, but I felt a surge of determination. "No, Sarah, I'm saving you from a lifetime of lies. You deserve to know the truth. This isn't just your wedding. It's a setup for our parents' financial gain." My mother's fury erupted. "You ungrateful child. You think you can just ruin your sister's happiness because you're bitter?" She spat, her voice rising to a shriek. Bitterness? No, this wasn't about bitterness. It was about standing up for what was right. About breaking the cycle of manipulation that had defined our family for far too long. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I was done being the quiet, dutiful daughter. I turned to the guests, many of whom were now leaning in, eager to hear what would unfold next. "You all have seen how my parents have treated me my whole life. And now they're using my sister to secure a business deal. This wedding was never about love. It's about money." The guests were a mix of shocked and intrigued, their whispers filling the room like a low hum. I could feel their eyes on me, some nodding in agreement, others uncertain of what to think. But I pressed on. "Sarah, I didn't want to ruin your day, but you have to see the truth. This isn't just a wedding. It's our parents' way of controlling us. They've always played favorites, and you've been their golden child while I've been the scapegoat." I took a step closer to her, my voice softer now. "I love you and I want you to be happy. But happiness built on lies is not real happiness. You deserve a partner who loves you for you, not because of a business arrangement." The tension in the room was thick, and I could see my sister's face contort with emotions, confusion, anger, and finally, a flicker of understanding. My mother was livid, her face red with rage and disbelief. "You're a disgrace. You'll regret this moment for the rest of your life," she yelled, but her words fell flat. I felt a sense of liberation as I realized that their threats and manipulation no longer held power over me. "I won't regret it," I said, meeting my mother's furious gaze with unwavering resolve. "I refuse to be part of this charade any longer. I refuse to be the invisible daughter who only exists to make you look good." The atmosphere was charged with adrenaline as I continued to speak my truth. This wedding should be about love, not about making deals. If you can't see that, then I'm sorry, but I can no longer play my part in this toxic family dynamic. I could see the shock on the guests' faces turning into sympathy for me. They had witnessed years of my family's dysfunction, and now I was finally exposing it for all to see. As I finished speaking, a wave of relief washed over me. The truth was out there, and no matter what happened next, I had finally stood up for myself. I had broken free from the chains of my family's expectations, and it felt exhilarating. The chaos erupted as my mother attempted to regain control. "You've destroyed everything we've worked for," she screamed, her voice rising above the murmurs of the crowd. My father, red-faced and fuming, tried to silence me. "You'll regret this, Emily. You're throwing away your family for some misguided sense of righteousness." But I didn't care. Their anger only fueled my determination. I was done being the scapegoat, the one who always backed down. I had taken control of my narrative, and I felt stronger than ever. As I looked around the room, I saw the guests processing what had just unfolded. Some were shaking their heads, while others whispered amongst themselves, clearly shocked by the revelation. My sister's face was pale, and I could see the realization dawning on her. She had been a pawn in their game too. "Emily, please," my sister pleaded, her voice cracking. "You're making a mistake. You're ruining my wedding." "No, Sarah, I'm trying to save you," I insisted, my heart aching for her. "This is not just about today. It's about your future. You deserve better than this." I stood firm, ready to face whatever consequences came my way. The tension and chaos around me felt like a storm, but I was finally free from the weight of my family's expectations. I had taken a stand, and I would not back down. This was my moment of truth, and I was ready to embrace the chaos that lay ahead. Instead of regret, my family's reaction was explosive. My mother's face twisted in fury, her eyes flashing with anger as if I had struck her physically. "You've ruined everything," she screamed, her voice high-pitched and frantic, cutting through the stunned silence like a knife. It was a sound I had heard before, but it never failed to send a shiver down my spine. I could see my father's face turning crimson with rage. His fists clenched as he tried to regain control of the situation. He moved toward me, his expression a mask of fury and disbelief, but I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated this time. "Emily, you think you can just stand there and destroy what we've built?" he shouted, his voice low and threatening. "You're making a fool of yourself in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how this affects our family?" His words were meant to silence me, to push me back into the obedient daughter role I had played for so long. But I didn't care. I had finally found my voice, and I wasn't going to let them take it away from me again. "No, Dad. I'm not making a fool of myself. I'm exposing the truth. This isn't about family. It's about greed and manipulation," I replied, my voice steady and unwavering. The guests were now a mix of shocked and intrigued, their eyes darting between my family and me, trying to process what was happening. Some began to murmur among themselves, their whispers filling the air like a low hum of disbelief. I could feel the weight of their attention on me, and it was strangely empowering. I was no longer the invisible daughter, hidden in the shadows of my sister's life. I was standing in the light, ready to confront the chaos head-on. My sister Sarah stood frozen, her face a mixture of confusion and hurt. "You're insane, Emily. How could you do this?" she shouted, her voice trembling with disbelief. I could see the pain in her eyes, but I felt a strange sense of validation. I hadn't lost anything. I had finally exposed the truth. "Because I love you, Sarah," I replied, my voice softening. "I refuse to let you walk down the aisle under false pretenses. You deserve to know what's really happening." But my mother wasn't finished. She stepped forward, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you're being brave, Emily, but you're just being foolish. You'll regret this. You have no idea what you're doing to your family." Her words were meant to intimidate me, to push me back into my place, but I felt a surge of strength. I was breaking free from their manipulation, and I would face whatever consequences came my way. The tension in the air was thick, and I could feel my heart racing. I was in the eye of the storm, and I was ready to embrace it. I looked around the room, at the guests who had come to celebrate love, but were now witnessing the unraveling of my family's facade. The reality of our dysfunction was out there for everyone to see, and I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. As the chaos continued to swirl around us, I could hear snippets of conversations among the guests. "Did you hear what she said? How could they use their own daughter like that?" Their shock and disbelief echoed my own feelings, and it fueled my resolve. I had taken a stand, and I was no longer afraid of the consequences. My mother's fury was palpable as she lashed out. "You've destroyed everything we've worked for," she screamed again, her voice rising above the murmurs of the crowd. "You think this is about you, but it's not. You're throwing away your family for some misguided sense of righteousness." But I didn't care. Their anger only fueled my determination. I was done being the scapegoat, the one who always backed down. I had taken control of my narrative, and I felt stronger than ever. As I looked around the room, I saw the guests processing what had just unfolded. Some were shaking their heads, while others whispered amongst themselves, clearly shocked by the revelation. My sister's face was pale, and I could see the realization dawning on her. She had been a pawn in their game too. It hurt to see her so devastated, but I knew I was doing the right thing. "Emily, please," my sister pleaded, her voice cracking. "You're making a mistake. You're ruining my wedding." "No, Sarah, I'm trying to save you," I insisted, my heart aching for her. "This is not just about today. It's about your future. You deserve better than this." The atmosphere was charged with adrenaline, and I could feel the tension in the air. I had finally stood up for myself, but the fallout was still unfolding. My parents were scrambling, trying to regain control but failing miserably. I could see their frustration and anger boiling over, and it felt like a victory. The chaos erupted as my mother attempted to regain control. "You've destroyed everything we've worked for," she shouted once more, her voice rising in pitch, desperation creeping in. My father, red-faced and fuming, tried to silence me. You'll regret this, Emily. You're throwing away your family for some misguided sense of righteousness. Their words felt like empty threats, meant to manipulate me back into submission. But I was done with their games. I had taken a stand, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. The guests began to murmur amongst themselves, their eyes wide with shock. I could hear someone whisper, "How could they use their own daughter like that?" My sister's face reflected devastation as she realized that her marriage was built on lies. The facade of our perfect family crumbled before my eyes. In that moment I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had broken free from the chains of their expectations, and I no longer feared their judgment. I had reclaimed my voice, and it was more powerful than I had ever imagined. My family was in chaos, but I finally felt at peace. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had stood up for myself and for the truth. As chaos erupted around me, I could see the groom's family withdrawing, their expressions shifting from excitement to confusion. They had come to celebrate a union based on love, but now they were faced with the harsh reality of my family's true intentions. I felt a rush of power surging through me. They were no longer the only players in this game. My family was exposed for their incompetence, their greed laid bare. My mother fumbled through her words, desperately trying to salvage her reputation. "You've ruined everything we've built," she screamed, her voice a mixture of rage and disbelief. It was a familiar tune, one I had heard countless times before whenever I dared challenge their authority. But this time I stood strong, unwavering in my conviction. The guests began to murmur amongst themselves, their eyes darting between my family and me, trying to process what had just happened. The whispers turned into a low hum of disbelief, and I could feel the atmosphere shifting. I had just pulled the curtain back on our family's facade, and there was no going back now. I glanced at my sister Sarah, who stood frozen in shock. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she processed the reality I had just unveiled. "Emily, please stop. You're making a mistake," she cried, her voice cracking with desperation. I could see tears welling in her eyes, and it broke my heart to witness her pain. But I knew I had to stay the course. "No, Sarah, I'm trying to save you," I replied, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "You deserve to know the truth about this wedding. It's not just about today. It's about your future, your happiness. This isn't love. It's a business arrangement meant to benefit our parents." My mother, still reeling from the unexpected turn of events, stepped forward, her face twisted with fury. "You think you're being brave, Emily, but you're just being foolish. You'll regret this moment for the rest of your life." She spat, her words laced with venom. The threat hung in the air, but I felt a strange sense of liberation wash over me. Their threats no longer held power over me. I had stepped into my truth, and I was ready to face the consequences. As I looked around the room, I could see the guests processing what had just unfolded. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief, while others whispered among themselves, clearly shocked by the revelation. I could hear snippets of conversations like, "How could they use their own daughter like that?" The murmurs grew louder, and I felt a sense of validation. I wasn't alone in this. I had the support of those who recognized the manipulation. My sister's devastation was palpable, and I could see the realization dawning on her as she struggled to comprehend the truth. Her dream wedding was crumbling before her eyes, and I hated that I had to be the one to shatter her illusion. But I knew it was necessary. "I love you, Sarah, but you need to see this for what it is. You deserve better than a life built on lies and deceit." The chaos around us continued to swirl, my mother's fury escalating as she fought to regain control. "You've destroyed everything we've worked for," she shouted again, her voice rising in pitch, desperation creeping in. I felt a sense of satisfaction at her distress. I had finally taken a stand for myself, and it felt empowering. My father, red-faced and fuming, tried to silence me, his voice low and threatening. "You'll regret this, Emily. You're throwing away your family for some misguided sense of righteousness." But I stood firm, refusing to let their anger intimidate me. I had taken control of my narrative, and I wasn't about to let them push me back into submission. The guests continued to murmur, their shock transforming into sympathy for me. I could feel the tide turning in my favor, and it fueled my resolve further. I was no longer the invisible daughter, hidden in the shadows of my sister's life. I was standing in the light, ready to confront the chaos head-on. As the tension in the room thickened, I turned my gaze back to my sister, who still looked bewildered. Sarah, this wedding should be about love, not about making deals. If you can't see that, then I'm sorry, but I can no longer play my part in this toxic family dynamic. You deserve a partner who loves you for you, not because of a business arrangement. The weight of my words hung in the air, and I could see the flicker of understanding in her eyes. It was a small victory, but it was enough. I was finally breaking free from the chains of their expectations, and it felt exhilarating. The chaos erupted around us, but I was ready to face whatever came next. As I stood there, feeling the eyes of the guests upon me, I realized that I had reclaimed my voice. The truth was out there, and no matter what happened next, I had finally stood up for myself. I had broken free from my family's manipulation, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This was my moment of truth, and I was ready to embrace it. As I stepped out of the venue, the chaos still ringing in my ears, a wave of calm washed over me. I had done it. I had broken free, and I could breathe. The weight of years of expectations and manipulation lifted, leaving behind a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in ages. I looked back at the grand building that had been the setting of my family's facade. It was no longer a place of warmth and acceptance. It was just a shell of what I had hoped it would be. I was free now. The guests were still inside, the whispers and gasps echoing in my mind. I had exposed the truth, and for the first time I felt like I mattered. As I drove away, I realized that I no longer cared how my family would spin the narrative. They would likely portray me as the villain, the one who ruined Sarah's wedding. But I had found my voice, and that was priceless. I didn't need their approval or their love to validate my existence. I was ready to build a life on my own terms, filled with genuine relationships and experiences that would nurture my soul. The silence in my car was beautiful. No judgment, no manipulation, just me and my thoughts. I had finally chosen myself. As I navigated the streets, I felt a sense of hope blooming within me. I would travel, focus on my career, and perhaps even find a new place to call home. I could design my life without the toxic influence of my family. With every mile I felt lighter, more empowered. I smiled at the thought of finally living for myself, embracing the unknown with open arms. This was my new normal, and it was filled